Jack's boots crunched on the gravel road as he walked home from town, his shoulders heavy with worry. The farm was barely surviving, and the stack of unpaid bills grew taller each week. Just when he thought the day couldn't get worse, he spotted a luxury car pulled over by the roadside. The hood was open and a young woman sat inside looking lost. Jack hesitated. He was exhausted, but something inside him whispered, "Go help." "Need a hand, miss?" He called out. She looked up, her face filled with relief. "Yes, please. My car just won't start." And with that, a simple encounter began a story neither of them would ever forget. Jack set down his basket of vegetables on the dusty roadside, the weight of the day still heavy on his shoulders. His shirt clung to him from the heat, his palms rough and calloused from hours of work on the farm. Yet when he saw the young woman leaning anxiously over her car with the hood propped open, worry written across her face, something inside him wouldn't let him keep walking. "Looks like you're having some trouble," Jack said, his voice calm and reassuring. Emily turned toward him, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. I think the engine just died. I tried calling for help, but there's no signal out here." Her tone was a mix of frustration and helplessness, so out of place against the backdrop of wide, endless fields. Jack gave her a gentle smile. "Don't worry. Let's take a look." Rolling up his sleeves, he leaned over the engine. The heat radiated from the car, but Jack's hands moved with confidence born from years of fixing broken tractors and worn-out tools. He wasn't a mechanic, but he knew machines. They all spoke the same language of nuts, bolts, and stubborn problems waiting to be solved. Emily stood a few steps back, nervously fiddling with her fingers as she watched him. She had grown up in a world where help was bought, not freely given, and she was struck by how quickly this stranger had stepped in without hesitation. Minutes passed. Jack tapped a part here, tightened something there, and finally gave a small nod. "All right, try starting it now." Emily slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and the engine sputtered, then roared back to life. Her eyes widened in delight, and she clapped her hands together like a child who had just witnessed a magic trick. "You did it. Thank you so much," she exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine relief. Jack wiped his brow with the back of his hand, his lips curving into a modest smile. "No need to thank me," he said softly. "Sometimes we all just need a little help." For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the steady hum of the revived engine. Emily looked at him, not just with gratitude, but with a growing sense of wonder. She had expected a random passerby, but what she found was kindness, simple, unpolished, and deeply human. And though Jack didn't know it yet, this small act of compassion would set in motion a chain of events that would change his life forever. Emily reached into her purse, pulled out a crisp bill, and held it out with both hands. Her voice was earnest. "Please take this. It's the least I can do." Jack glanced at the money, then back at Emily. He gave a soft chuckle and shook his head. "Keep it," he said gently. "Just glad you're safe." Emily blinked, stunned for a moment. In her world, gratitude was usually measured in dollars. In the city, nothing came free. Parking, advice, even a glass of water at certain cafes. Yet here was a man, dusty and worn from a day's labor, refusing payment as though kindness was enough of a reward. "You're serious?" she asked, searching his expression. "Of course," Jack said, his tone simple and matter-of-fact. "If I charged every time I helped a neighbor fix a tractor or jump a battery, nobody would get anywhere. Sometimes helping is just the right thing to do." His words struck her deeper than she expected. Emily studied him, his sunburnt skin, the roughness of his palms, the quiet humility in his eyes. He didn't seem to realize how rare his kind of generosity was, or maybe he did, and that's what made it so genuine. For a moment, Emily hesitated, then pulled out a small card from her wallet. She pressed it into his hand. "Then at least take this. My name's Emily. If you ever need anything, call me." Jack looked at the card, her name embossed neatly alongside a number and company logo. He didn't think much of it. It was probably some office line in a city miles away from his farm. Still, not wanting to be rude, he gave her a polite nod and tucked the card into his shirt pocket. "Thank you," he said, "but I doubt I'll ever need it." Emily smiled, though a flicker of curiosity lingered in her gaze. This farmer, with his worn boots and quiet strength, seemed so different from the people she usually met. As Jack picked up his basket of vegetables and turned back toward the road, he didn't realize how important that little card would become. how it would be the bridge between his world and hers, and the key to a future he could never have imagined. A few days later, Jack was working in his field, the sun beating down on his back as he stacked bales of hay. His shirt clung to him, damp with sweat, but he worked steadily, his mind on nothing more than getting through the day. Farming was hard, lonely work, and lately he felt like he was just treading water, barely holding on. The crunch of gravel tires drew his attention. A sleek black car rolled up the dirt path, out of place against the rustic backdrop of his weathered barn and sun-baked land. Jack squinted as the door opened, and to his surprise, Emily stepped out. "Emily?" he asked, wiping his hands on his jeans. "What are you doing out here?" She smiled warmly, though there was something in her eyes, a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I wanted to thank you properly. I realized I never really got the chance." Jack shrugged, a little embarrassed. "You already did. Your car's running, isn't it?" Emily shook her head. "I mean more than that." She glanced around the farm, the sagging fence posts, the aging tractor, the lines of exhaustion on Jack's face. She could see the weight he carried, the quiet battle of keeping this land alive. "I didn't tell you before," she continued carefully. "But my father, he owns several companies. He's a billionaire." Jack froze, unsure he'd heard right. He let out a short laugh, thinking she might be joking, but the seriousness in her gaze told him otherwise. "I don't understand," he muttered. Emily took a step closer, her tone soft but steady. "When you helped me, you didn't know who I was. You didn't care. You just saw someone who needed help. That means more than you realize. Most people, they only do something when there's something in it for them. But you didn't." Jack shifted uneasily, scratching the back of his neck. "I wasn't trying to prove anything, I just did what anyone should." "Exactly," Emily said, her voice almost a whisper. "And that's why it matters." Jack didn't know it yet, but this revelation, the truth about who Emily really was, would be the beginning of something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. Jack leaned against the fence post, still reeling from Emily's revelation. A billionaire's daughter was standing in his dusty yard, speaking to him as if he were someone important. It didn't make sense. Men like him didn't cross paths with women like her, except by sheer accident. Like that day on the roadside. Emily took in the scene again, the sagging barn roof, the tractor that looked like it had seen better decades, the empty field where crops had failed in the dry summer. She turned back to Jack with a resolve that surprised even herself. "You know," she began softly, "my father's company invests in communities, especially in agriculture. But those investments usually go to people who already have plenty. They don't go to farmers like you, the ones who actually need it." Jack frowned. "I don't need charity." His pride bristled, and his voice carried the weight of a man who had fought too long to stand on his own. Emily shook her head quickly. "This isn't charity, Jack, it's a chance. You helped me without asking for anything in return. Let me help you, not out of pity, but out of respect." Her sincerity cut through his defenses. Still, he hesitated, gripping the brim of his cap. "I wouldn't even know what to ask for." Emily stepped closer, her eyes steady. "Start with what you need most. Equipment, seeds, repairs. My father has the resources, and I can convince him this farm is worth investing in. But more than that," her voice softened, "I believe it's worth it." Jack's throat tightened. For years he had carried the burden of the land alone, watching neighbors give up their farms, watching his own future slip further away with each bad season. And here was this woman, a stranger from the city, offering him something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "You really think your father would listen?" he asked quietly. Emily smiled. "If he doesn't, I will. You have my word." For the first time in months, Jack allowed himself to imagine what it might feel like to not just survive, but rebuild, restore, and even thrive. And all because of a single act of kindness on a dusty road. Weeks passed, and Jack almost convinced himself that Emily's promise had been a dream, something too good to be real. But one crisp autumn morning, a convoy of trucks rolled down his dirt road. Shiny tractors, crates of fresh seed, and workers ready to mend fences and repair barns filled his quiet farmyard. Jack stood frozen on the porch, disbelief etched across his face. Emily stepped out of a sleek SUV, her smile wide and genuine. "I told you I'd come back," she said softly. "And I keep my word." Jack could barely find the words. This is too much." Emily shook her head firmly. "No, Jack, this is exactly what you deserve. You gave me something priceless that day. Kindness without conditions. You reminded me what generosity really looks like. This is just my way of passing it forward." As the workers got to it, the farm came alive in ways Jack hadn't seen in years. Broken fences were mended, machinery replaced, the soil turned rich and ready for planting. His neighbors gathered along the road, whispering in amazement, their eyes wide at the sudden transformation. Jack's chest tightened with emotion. He thought of all the times he had stood under the stars at night, wondering if his hard work would ever be enough. And now, because of one simple act of compassion on a roadside, his world was being rewritten. Emily walked beside him as he surveyed the changes. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "my father was skeptical at first, but when I told him your story, when I described the man who helped me without asking who I was or what I could give in return, he agreed. He said this is exactly the kind of person who should be lifted up." Tears stung Jack's eyes, though he blinked them back. "I don't know how to thank you. Just keep being you," Emily replied warmly. "That's thanks enough." The sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the newly revived farm. For the first time in years, Jack didn't feel like a man barely holding on. He felt like a man standing at the beginning of something extraordinary, all because he chose kindness when it mattered most. Jack never imagined that helping a stranger on a dusty road would change his life. What began as a simple act of kindness blossomed into hope, renewal, and a friendship that bridged two very different worlds. Emily's gratitude proved that compassion has a ripple effect, turning small gestures into life-changing opportunities. For Jack, the farm was more than saved. It was reborn. And for Emily, she discovered that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in humanity. Their story reminds us all. One moment of kindness can plant seeds that grow into miracles.